Is Willy Adames an ideal fit for the New York Mets this offseason? We'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Down the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so we're talking Willy Adames today. The New York Mets have shown some early free agent interest in the shortstop who would play third base if signed by the New York Mets, because obviously the Mets ain't moving Francisco Lindor off of shortstop. Lindor, by the way, just won his second straight Silver Slugger, so he did get some hardware for that great season that he had. He is an MVP finalist, will not win it. Shohei Ohtani is going to take home the award, but every chance Lindor finishes as the MVP runner-up. Now the question is, do you pair Willy Adames with him, giving you a really exceptional defensive left side of the infield with plenty of upside offensively? It's an interesting idea to sign Willy Adames to fill a need at third base. The Mets want to go out this offseason and address the hot corner. Their options are limited. The top free agent is Alex Bregman. And Bregman's coming off sort of a mixed season, right? He hit 26 homers, definitely improved greatly because he got off to a rough start, ended up being a 4-win player again, still showed an ability to drive in runs and just be a solid bat in the lineup, but he is long removed from the days of being an MVP candidate, okay? Early in his career, Alex Bregman is one of the best players in baseball. How much you wanted to attribute that to whatever was going on in his early days in Houston as far as sign stealing, or just look at the player that he was in 2019 when they were supposedly past the sign stealing scandal, and he hit 41 home runs, drove in 112, hit 296, got on base at a 423 clip. It's up for interpretation how he got to those numbers, but what Alex Bregman has been over the last 3 years is more 20 to 25 home runs. Still had 90 plus RBIs in 2022 and 2023, but this year only 75 RBIs. He has been good, but not as great as he once was. Now, with that said, still, if you look at production over the last 3 years, he has been better than Willy Adames, but is he going to get paid significantly better than Adames? I think that is the big question when you're looking at the third base market, because if these guys are going to get paid in a similar tier, you could make a case, why aren't the Mets in on Bregman? It doesn't seem like Bregman is a free agent the Mets have circled up to this point. These things can change, but that could either be because maybe the industry feels Bregman's going back to Houston, or maybe the Mets just look at Willy Adames and think that he is a player that might age better and is more worth this type of investment. You can say that Willy Adames is a better athlete at this stage than Alex Bregman. He's a year younger. He is a shortstop, not a third baseman. Granted, you're going to be signing him to play third, but I think the idea is Adames has been a very good defensive shortstop. A move over to third base could make him an elite defender at that position. So the Mets are looking at Adames as a guy that would give you a really good glove with plenty of offensive upside. He's coming off a season where he hit 32 home runs and drove in 112. That is some great production. He also stole 21 bases. Okay, Alex Bregman does not have that as part of his game anymore. So you're getting a more tooled up player at third base, I think, with Willy Adames. And he's a guy that David Stearns has already acquired once, right? He started his career in Tampa with the Rays. In 2021, the Brewers made a trade to acquire Willy Adames. At the time, David Stearns was still running the show in Milwaukee, and Adames rewarded him that season, comes over, plays 99 games. He was hitting below the Mendoza line with the Rays to start the season in 41 games, gets traded to Milwaukee, gets out of that ballpark in Tampa where it's really hard to hit, All of a sudden, he hits 285 in those 99 games, smashes 20 home runs, gets on base at a 366 clip, slugs at a 521 clip, had a 136 WRC plus. WRC plus is weighted runs created plus. It's a stat that is all encompassing. It's park adjusted. It's just a baseline to tell you how good of a hitter a player really is compared to league average, with league average being 100. So 136 WRC plus means he's 36 points better than league average. It was a monster first season with the Brewers. Since then, it's been a little bit inconsistent for Willy Adames. 2022, he hits 31 homers. That's great. But he gets on base at a slightly below 300 clip at 298, hit 238. Did drive in 98, but the WRC plus was 109, only a little bit better than league average. Then last year, 2023, he had a down season. He hit only 217, 310 on base, 407 slug, hit 24 homers, drove in 80. And then he had a 94 WRC plus, so 6 points below league average. This year, like I said, great offensive season. 32 homers, 112 driven in, 21 stolen bases. All that's great. Average of 251, on base of 331, slug of 462. So a slightly below 800 OPS at 793. Still really good production. WRC plus of 119. That was the career year, though. Altogether, that is the best season Willy Adames has ever had. Is he going to be able to replicate that offensively moving forward? That's where I have some real concerns about Willy Adames. I'm not worried about the glove. I'm not. If he slides over to third base, I think he will thrive at the position, and the Mets infield defense will be significantly improved if you had Adames at third, Lindor at short, Jeff McNeil maybe being the opening day guy, but they have a million of other options internally to play second, whether that's Luis Angel Acuna, Jet Williams, Ronnie Mauricio, if they were to re-sign Jose Iglesias. That's a position you're not really worried about, particularly defensively, because pretty much all those guys are good options at the position. And then at first base, you'd be sliding Mark Vientos from third to first. And I think the hope would be his defense could actually play up and be plus at first instead of league average at best at third. That arm that he has would be a kind of crazy asset to have at first base. You think that you'd definitely be improved at turning two pretty much across the board. Adames at third, Vientos at first. It makes the Mets a better defensive team. There's no doubt about that. My only concern with Willy Adames, how does this guy age offensively? Is he the type that can fall off a cliff? And what is the contract going to be? Because top shortstops in the market over the last couple of years have been paid on a wildly different scale depending on the year you look at. So that's what I want to talk about next here. Is he going to get paid like a top free agent shortstop that'll be moving over to third? What does that contract look like? And then us will start to compare this to Pete Alonso, because I don't really think you're signing both Adames or Alonso. Where is there more value this free agent period? We'll talk about it all in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. If you just got nothing to do this weekend, pull open the GameTime app, find the Live Nearby tab, and you can just look at anything that's around you, any event that might be exciting, whether it is a comedy show or a theater performance, or if you're trying to catch an NBA game, GameTime is there for you. And their GameTime Picks feature will filter out the fluff and show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to look through thousands of tickets to find the best possible deal. GameTime is going to make that simpler for you with GameTime Picks. And if you download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Now, Willy Adames' free agency, to me, depends a lot on what he's going to get paid. If you look at the last couple of off seasons, shortstops have really ranged pretty drastically in what they've received on the open market. Last year, there was no top shortstop to speak of. The year prior, you had Trey Turner and Xander Bogaerts as the two headliners on the market. They each got 11-year deals. Trey Turner's was $300 million, so he got over $27 million per year when it comes to average annual value. Bogaerts got a $280 million deal, which came out to $25.5 million about. It's really $25.45 million, and that got him locked up with the Padres for the rest of the decade. You look at those two deals, they have aged, I think, pretty poorly overall. Trey Turner is still a really good player. I think at some point he might have to move off of shortstop if the Phillies really want to improve, because defensively, Trey Turner, I just don't think he's going to be able to age well at that position. But regardless, for the next 5 years still, he should still be a valuable player for the Phillies. When it comes to the final 4 years of that deal, it's going to look ugly. Meanwhile, Xander Bogaerts, it's kind of already looking ugly. He has fallen off. He's no longer playing shortstop. They slid him over to second base. Then when Hae-Sung Kim got hurt, they then moved him back to short long term. It's either shortstop. Who really knows? But an 11-year deal is a disaster for Xander Bogaerts. And I think a lot of us knew it at the time. So if you look at Willy Adames, and if he's going to get a 10-year deal because he just turned 29 years old, you're staying away. There's no chance that the Mets are going to do that. But you look at a year prior, 2022 offseason, Javi Baez and Trevor Story each got 6-year, $140 million deals. If Willy Adames is closer to that camp than the $300 million deal camp, right? If he's somewhere a little bit more closer to reality, well, now we're talking about a very interesting proposition. And for Baez and Story, those contracts, which have actually aged probably even worse than the Turner and Bogaerts contracts, but those deals were for an average annual value of over $23 million. So if you could get Adames and it's less than $25 million per, maybe you tack on a 7th year. So maybe instead of going all the way out to a decade-long contract, he is coming back down closer to the 6-year 140 range, but instead you throw a 7th year on top of it. So it's 7 years, $160 million, something like that, right? Now you're looking at a player that I think makes a lot of sense. I think you can really talk yourself into the next 5 years of Willy Adames being really strong, and then not much beyond that you have to be too concerned with. If it was a $160 million deal over 7 years, that's $22.85 million per when it comes to average annual value. It's not bad value at all for a starting third baseman, but a 7-year deal, still very long. And the question for me still comes back to the offensive numbers. You're talking about a guy that for his career is, a 248 hitter with a 444 slug and a 322 on base. A good hitter, but a career 766 OPS. You compare that to Pete Alonso if we're just talking about bat alone. Pete Alonso's had far better seasons. Obviously, he brings a much better bat when it comes to the power. He's got a career 854 OPS. Now, you could look at last season and say Willy Adames was right there with Pete Alonso, or even better. He got him in average and on base and in slug. WRC plus, for some reason, slightly favored Alonso. Home runs, Alonso had the edge by a couple. RBIs, Adames got him. So they had very similar offensive seasons. But a year prior, 2023, Pete Alonso hit 46 home runs, drove in 118. Year before that, Pete Alonso hit 40 home runs, drove in 131. And if you look at those guys when they were taking at bats in October, granted, Adames only played 3 games. Pete Alonso got a much longer run to showcase his talents. I think that it's still pretty clear that if you talk to an opposing pitcher and they have to face these two guys, they fear Pete Alonso more. Now, you might say, well, what about those sliders blown away that Pete Alonso swings through, strikes out a ton? Are they able to pitch around Pete Alonso better than Willy Adames? You could say that to a certain respect because of some of the holes in Pete's swing, but you're talking about a guy in Adames whose career strikeout rate is 27%. Pete Alonso's is 22.8%. So historically, Pete Alonso has been the tougher out pretty much across the board. And Alonso He's right there when it comes to batting average in his career against Adames. He's a more than a little bit, 17 points better in on-base percentage and 70 points better in slug. Pete Alonso is the better hitter, no doubt in my mind, and I feel better about Pete Alonso aging because he's still hitting the ball harder than Willy Adames, and he's just I feel like you get Pete Alonso past the contract situation. I think you're going to get a return of what he has been throughout his career, which was 40 and 100. Willie Adames is not a guaranteed 30-90 guy. He's just not. I think you had to look at him and say, okay, I'm probably going to get 25 homers, 80 RBIs, and really good defense. But your lineup is going to take a step back offensively. It's going to take a step up defensively for sure. But I don't know if Adames really is a better fit than Pete Alonso if these two guys end up making similar deals when it comes to their free agent contracts. If they both end up somewhere in, I would say, the 6 to 7 year range and not more than $25 million, $25 million per year being sort of the max value that they might get when it comes to average annual value. For my money, I think Pete Alonso is the better fit. He has built so much equity with the Mets franchise, the fan base. Why not just bring Pete Alonso back and have him be your starting first baseman, keep Mark Vientos at third, figure out what else you want to do to bolster your team. And obviously Juan Soto is still the big fish that we're all waiting on. Mets are putting on a full court press to sign him. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Soto and how that impacts these two guys. I don't think that it's absolutely a sure thing that the Mets won't sign both Juan Soto and one of these guys. But just when it comes to completing their infield, who is the better fit long term? Is it better to look at the defense and go ahead and sign Willy Adames? Or does it make more sense to just keep your guy, bring back the best possible bat when it comes to driving the ball and putting runs on the board and figuring out the defensive side of things later? We're going to go through Alonso or Adames as a debate here in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and you're going to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And again, you throw that $5 bet down, you find something that you just know is going to hit, whether you're betting on the Knicks, which I think is maybe a little bit of a surer bet than the Jets or the Giants at this stage, or maybe you're just looking at the Chiefs to just win a game, or maybe it's the Celtics to win a game. Find the best possible bet that you can. Throw $5 on the money line or whatever else it is, whether it's maybe the over on a potential game. And if you win that first $5 bet, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started with that offer. You win the first $5 bet, $150 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks from the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the long-term fit between the Mets, Willy Adames, and if that's better than Pete Alonso. You look at the third base position for the Mets. Long-term, right now, the best option is Mark Vientos. Now, the signing of Willy Adames is an admission from the Mets front office that they do not believe that Mark Vientos can be a third baseman long-term. And that is not a crazy assumption to make. The defensive metrics did not love Mark Vientos this past year. I'm going to pull him up real quick. I think the eye test showed us that this guy was fine at third base. And I really do believe that there is something to be said about value added when you have a surplus level of talent for a position offensively that doesn't always get the best bat. So third base, it's hard to find a guy that can hit 40 home runs and really impact the game offensively the way Mark Vientos does. And I've made the comp before, but I look at Mark Vientos as a Rafael Devers light just when it comes to that idea of a plus hitter that might not be the best defensively. But the difference too, Vientos has a tangible skill defensively that Devers does not. His arm's a cannon. And I just feel like just specifically for Mark Vientos, he is more valuable as a third baseman than a first baseman. When he hits free agency years from now, if he hits as a third baseman that has held his own at the position for all this time while averaging 30 plus home runs a season, he is going to get paid more than if he is a first base only. That's just the sliding scale of value when it comes to each defensive position. If you can have a guy that can hold down the third and give you 40 home runs, it is a rarity. Now, Willy Adames could be a better option defensively. There's no doubt about it. You look at what Mark Vientos did. It was -6 defensive runs saved, -6 outs above average. That is not great, but it's not as bad as I think many scouts would have imagined it would be with this guy getting regular playing time at the hot corner. So I still think that Vientos can handle third. But again, if the Mets sign Adames, they're saying, look, we think that Vientos will be better suited to just move over and play first base, to not have to worry about all of the added elements of playing third when it comes to playing in on the bunt, being able to fill your position there, being able to guard the line, having to make those tough throws. First base is obviously an easier position, and there is a world where Mark Vientos could get very good at it. I think right now, third is still a better position for him as far as where he's more comfortable than first base, but a full offseason knowing he's going to be the first baseman, working on it. Yeah, I think your infield defense is better. But again, when it comes to these two players who are free agents, Adames or Alonso, I really believe in Pete Alonso a lot more offensively. I just do. And I think you always have the ability to move Pete to DH, and you still could slide Vientos over to first if you have one of these other young players who establish themselves as the answer at the position. If you sign Willy Adames, you're also pretty much boxing out Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio. Now, when it comes to Beatty, no one's going to be upset with that. He is a change of scenery guy. He's someone that very much could be dealt this offseason and not part of the Mets' long-term plans anyway. But Ronnie Mauricio is still a prospect that some people really like, and third base might be the best position for him long-term, especially when you have an Acuna or a Williams that could be your second baseman of the future. So you are boxing on Mauricio a little bit. I don't think that precludes you from signing Willy Adames. Mauricio has yet to establish himself at the big league level. But I do think there are options at third base for the New York Mets beyond Mark Vientos that you would sort of push to the side if you sign Adames. It's okay to do that. Those players can find value in other places, whether it's Mauricio sliding into the outfield, whether it's trading some guys. You're not going to avoid Adames because of some of the young players. But I think the third base position isn't as much of a need as you might think it is because you have Vientos as a really good option. And then you still have the ability this year to see what you have in Beatty, to see what you have in Mauricio, to see what you have in Acuna. Maybe you throw him at third base a little bit just to see what it looks like. And if any of those guys establish themselves, well, you could always move Vientos to DH or to first base and move Pete to DH. Maybe it's just the homer in me. I like the idea of Pete Alonso coming back more than signing Willy Adames. I really do. I think there's a chance that Adames gets paid more anyway. I think Pete's market could really come back to the Mets. We'll see. We'll see. If Pete Alonso gets paid more than Adames, yeah, I think I'd end up looking at the two contracts when it's all said and done. If the Mets sign Adames and say, yeah, okay, they made the right call. But I would prefer the Mets to re-sign Pete. And obviously the Juan Soto question still looms. The Mets will meet with him this week. I think there's a world where you sign both Soto and Alonso, and you get a little bit of a Scott Boras package deal. Not that either of them takes a necessary discount, but with those two guys being represented by the same agent, I could see those conversations unfolding where you're going to have in this meeting this week Francisco Lindor, Steve Cohen, David Stearns, who knows who else might be there. Maybe Carlos Beltran is part of the meeting. It's taking place in Southern California. Maybe they get David Wright to come in too. And you're making this pitch to Juan Soto about what it means to be a New York Met. I don't think in that conversation you're saying, yeah, and we're going to slide, Vientos to first base and play Brett Beatty at third. Now, they might be saying we're going to slide Vientos to first base and we're still going to sign Willy Adames, but Scott Boras like, well, if you need a third baseman, maybe it's Alex Bregman. I feel like there's a world where they're saying, look, we want to bring Pete back. We want to slide you into the mix. We want to take the same exact team that just went to the NLCS and plug you into that lineup. That's our goal. We had a team that was very much ready-made when it came down to it to win the World Series. When it came to the lineup that they had, they needed to add more pitching. They plan to address that, but they're going to be put over the top by Juan Soto, and they're going to bring Alonso back, and that's going to be the team that's going to be able to go up against the Dodgers and win against the Dodgers. I think that's the pitch that they might be presenting Juan Soto with, and if that's the case, I think Mets fans are going to be very happy. If instead it's just sign Juan Soto and then figure out the rest of it, and Adames is the guy that the Mets identify because they're going to take a step back defensively with Juan Soto, so now improve by bringing in Adames at third base to give you better infield defense. I get it, and the roster construction is sound, and it does feel in a lot of ways like that is more the David Stearns move than getting the heartstrings attached and bringing back Pete. But for my money, for what I want to see happen, I'm still partial to Pete Alonso. If the Mets sign Willy Adames, I'll definitely come around on it, and I will like the move. I think when it comes to options at third base this offseason, there's no question Willy Adames is the best one. I like the idea of signing him a lot more than Alex Bregman. When it comes to the trade market, you're looking at guys who are either injury prone or old. So Nolan Arenado falls under the older category. Carlos Correa, there's been some rumblings. Oh, maybe he's on the market again. No trade clauses there. Guy had plantar fasciitis this past year. He was actually great when he was on the field, but big injury risk. Could you actually revisit that situation again after all the breakdown and contract stuff a couple years ago? I don't know. There's just not a lot of good options at third base. So if the Mets are going to improve at that position, if they are hell-bent on moving Mark Vientos to first, I do like the idea of signing Willy Adames instead of going into next year and just hoping that Brett Beatty's the guy. I think that would be a mistake. So I like the idea of Willy Adames. I think it's an interesting free agent to pursue. It's just not my personal plan A. My personal plan A is keeping Pete Alonso in a Mets uniform and believing in Mark Vientos that he is your third baseman of the future, and he can still continue to improve defensively and get closer and closer to being at least league average. And that prospect of going into next year and going into the next 5 years potentially with a 40 home run guy at each corner, to me, that's more tantalizing than the upside defensively with Adames, but the real questions and concerns about what he's going to be long-term, a guy that's been a pretty inconsistent hitter throughout his career. You're talking about paying him potentially upwards of $25 million, a 7-year deal. If in 2 years he's just a glove-only player at third base, that contract is going to really kill you. I think Pete Alonso, on the other hand, is going to hit. I think Pete's going to hit. Whether he can play first base for the entire deal, that's another conversation for another day. I believe Pete's going to hit the whole way through. I think Adames will defend the whole way through. It's just a matter of what you like more. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. We still got a lot to discuss throughout the week. I will do a show on the potential to trade for Garrett Crochet. We'll also talk about some other trade ideas. I want to maybe put Jordan Montgomery in the same show potentially because I think it's a completely different scale of value, but an interesting debate on where you should invest your resources when it comes to prospects. So we're going to do that potentially on tomorrow's show. Not entirely sure when the Mets will meet with Juan Soto, but that's something we'll be discussing whenever that meeting occurs. Whatever information we get on that, we'll be talking about on the show. And of course, as these awards come in, we'll address those as well. Francisco Lindor, another Silver Slugger Award. Awesome news today. Is Carlos Mendoza going to win the Manager of the Year? Could Lindor pull off the upset of a lifetime in MVP voting? Probably not, but we will keep you updated on all of those developments throughout the week. I appreciate you all for tuning in. If you're listening on the audio side, do me a favor, follow, rate, review. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Goal right now is to get to 11,000 subscribers, and we're within 200. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. If you want to be a Locked On Mets Insider, find the link in the episode description. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so on Twitter or on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. And if you're a second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything, the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.